Hey, everybody, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. We've got a terrific one for you today. A lot of things happening in this particular episode. It's going to weave, it's going to twist, it's going to sound like a knot. We're going to pull some strings. But ultimately, our goal is to help you think practically about a couple of different issues in your practice. To do that, our stars today are Brent Doré and Carl Doré. They're the backbone of the Doré Rothberg Law Firm in Texas. Now, I've known Carl for a while because Carl's a longtime Atticus member, and then Brent took over the mantle of the law firm, and he's been a longtime Atticus member. So they really own a very unique distinction in that they're a father-son team, and they both are multi-generational in their law firm and multi-generational in Atticus, which is kind of making me feel old as I say that out loud. So as we dig into this episode, they're going to talk about a pivotal year. In 2020, they had a fantastic year, incredible year. However, in 2022, they nearly lost everything and they had to reinvent their firm. They're here today to talk about what they had to do to redesign the firm, reinvent the firm, talk about what happened, and share their insights, stories, and lessons, everything from how they turned the firm around to how to successfully, or sometimes bumpily, transition from founder to new owner. So with that, Brent, Carl, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for having us on.
Oh, it's great to have you guys here. And I was teasing Carl beforehand. I've got some great Carl stories that we may or may not talk about depending on how Carl behaves on the episode. But Brent, let's start with you. What happened in 2020? We had a record year. 2022, the wheels fell off of the law firm. Now, I want to set context. Where do you guys practice? What's your practice about? Like, who do you serve? And then let's talk about what happened.
Sure. So Doré Rothberg Law is we're proudly celebrating our 35th anniversary in 2025. Full service kind of business law firm, originally based in Houston, and now we also have an office in Fort Worth, Texas, in the DFW Metroplex. We do a lot of work with oil and gas service companies, but we also do general business, estate planning, probate, real estate work as well. While a lot of people, 2020 was a rough year, and to be sure, it was in many ways for us too. A lot of our clients, when oil prices go down or negative as they did in 2020, we're doing a lot of mineral liens, collection work, bankruptcy work, that sort of thing. So 2020 was kind of the culmination of up to that point about 30 years of Carl building the firm and that sort of thing. 2021 was a good year for us. Kind of went down a little bit, but I don't think we thought too much of it. But then 2022, I'll never forget. It was Q1 of 2022. We were looking around, going, "What the heck just happened?" Our cash flow kind of fell apart on us. We realized we had been too conservative in backfilling positions of people who had left. We did not get hit so hard during like peak COVID with losing people. But the headhunters came out strong in 2021, and we lost some really great people in 2021, and we had a couple people who left, other reasons too. And we kind of looked around and go, what the heck just happened? Like, I think the best way of saying it is we were too conservative on not backfilling, too nervous to do that. And then also not being tight enough on our systems and processes, especially on the collections, like our own collections, like our billing, our pre-bills, our all that kind of stuff. And then I think the third thing was, and I've told Carl and my other partners, is there were some creakiness in the whole of the ship, even in 2020, that we probably should have invested in then, namely like going to cloud-based systems and technology and infrastructure. And we didn't. So then we started doing that and went live with that at the end of 2021, 22. Well, when you got to write big checks to technology companies and everything, that's going to have a big crunch on the cash flow too, especially when the cash flow is kind of terrible already. So it really put us in a tough spot in 2022. and we'll talk more about this, but because of some of the things that we did coming out of Atticus, coming out of these hard learned lessons, 2023, 24, and now 25 looking like they're going to be record years for us.
That's fantastic. So 2020, we're having a great year, and we weren't making, or we were probably hesitant to make investments in 2020, 2021, 2022. By the time 2022 hits, we're not managing our own cash flow well. We're not managing our billing well. Some of our systems are not where we'd like them to be because we were so busy in 2020 and 2021. And then we had to, in addition to that, invest to fix some of the firm-wide problems that were occurring in 2022. So we had an extra pinch, so to speak, financially. Carl, anything you want to add to that? Like from your perspective, you're hearing Brent describe it. Where were you with this whole thing?
Just a little because of the COVID era of 2020. That first quarter before the world changed, that was our record quarter of all time. Second quarter, we were not even making expenses from cash flow, but we were so busy because our client needs were driving so much work. And so I pulled everybody together and said, look, if all our clients go out of business, well, that's a whole different question. But right now they need us. So let's be there for them. And we were working harder than ever. Deadlines were all over the place being driven. Things were happening. We were having to file documents with courthouses that were closed. It was a mess. By third quarter, we got a PPP loan. That was enough to keep us going. And then by fourth quarter, things started happening and changing. And then we moved into 2021. So yeah, it was a horrible time for our client base, a horrible time for us from a cash flow perspective on trying to make projections and stuff. So we could not have invested in we just didn't have the capability to invest in some of the infrastructure that we did in 2021 and 2022. We needed it. Brent is right. We needed it in 2020, but we couldn't get there. We're there now.
Let's talk about how you pivoted and how you had the record year. So, Brent, what was the first or second or third strategy that you implemented to start the pivot out of 2022?
Yeah, so I think there were several things. One that was not even intentionally done to get us out of that. It was more we hired a controller. She's now been promoted to CFO, Christy Bowersox, who came in and was able to help us really think through and professionalize a lot of our collections systems. And there were definitely times where that process did not turn as quickly. I was turning the Titanic at times, but I think that was very helpful to us, and I'm very thankful that she joined it. I think the other big thing was by making those investments in the technology, it allowed us a better visualization of our KPIs and understanding how do we evaluate productivity across the firm. And a lot of that actually at an Atticus PGP with Mark Metzger and Victor, I think it was in late 2022, where we came up with the idea of what we call DRL hours, which is how do we evaluate productivity across the firm when some of our stuff is flat rate, some of our stuff is billed full hourly rate, different practice areas, different clients, different client needs. How do we look at that across the board? And so we went under the hood and really dug deep on that. And then we're able to develop some strategies around goal setting, incentives for the team, bonus structures for attorneys, all those sorts of things to create a structure where people would be excited and motivated and understand what we're trying to accomplish. I think that was huge. And I also give a lot of credit to, in 2022, we hired 7 attorneys in a 6-month period, which was kind of a Hail Mary. Like I said, we're in 2022. It was a really rough year. we realized the big thing we needed to do was be more aggressive with how we hired and more intentional about that. So in 2022, like I said, tough year, we decided to make kind of a Hail Mary investment, hired 7 attorneys in a 6 month period. Could have been a disaster because that's a lot of new personalities and egos to all bring onto the team. But thankfully, we have a incredible paralegal team that was the backbone through all that. All those hires turned out to be very strong, ones who've stayed with us in some cases, and other times have gone to become referral sources for us now, things like that. And it was because we really invested in that team, but also were strategic about it and intentional about it and really focused on onboarding and those systems that I think set a good foundation so that at the end of that year, we could say, okay, in 2023, we're going to have a record year. We really didn't know how we were going to do that, but we cast the vision and the team got on board. And like I said, it's been just upwards since then.
Well, it sounds like a fairly critical pivot, but one of the things under that was the heart of, and you call it DRO hours. Is that how you said it?
DRL, Doré Rothberg Law, DRL.
Thank you. DRL. And let's unpack that, because my recollection is you guys do hourly work, fixed work, and contingency fee. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is important to understand, because a lot of lawyers get confused about the different pricing models. You guys have all three. Explain more about what those hours mean. Unpack that a little bit for those of us that are trying to understand what you're saying as a key performance indicator there. Explain that to me a little.
And that's a good idea, because it is really one of the biggest changes.
Okay. And this is a mystery to a lot of lawyers that are do hourly rate and fixed rate, and how do you track this stuff? So yeah, explain it to me. How did you guys analyze this and come up with it?
Sure. That's a great question. So I will first preface it by saying everyone still tracks their hours at our firm, even if it's on a contingency, which is relatively rare for us, or on a flat rate. And that kind of defeats the purpose for some contingency or flat rate firms, because it's like, I don't want to track my time. We do it just so we can see how much time is still going into each of these files, and that sort of thing. So when we were sitting down and trying to figure this out on a pure income basis, obviously someone who's working in the litigation or bankruptcy section billing full hourly rate is going to be bringing in more pure dollars than someone who's billing time on more flat rate type things. But our firm is unique in that, since we do a lot of work in the oil and gas sector that is tied with mineral liens, which we do on a kind of flat or hybrid rate. And that's like the foundation and the fuel that fires a lot of the other sections of our firm. So we don't want to give short shrift to what they're doing versus the full billable rate stuff. So that's where we kind of looked across the board and said, okay, we went to like the rule of three that we talk about in Atticus, about profitability for law firms. And we said, if our hourly requirement is this, can we boost productivity without having to hire a lot more people? Can we find the right mix of hours, whether it's, and quantify that on a person by person basis, so that we can be profitable and serve our clients and that sort of thing. So we still, this is getting really in the weeds, we still look to, like, if I have an associate who comes to me and says, I want to raise, I will look at their DRL hours, which is kind of a baseline, but I'll also look at the hours that they personally build, and what their mix of hours is personally, and kind of look to see what's the right mix for that particular person, and see what we can do there. But I will also say our model is we have a very low billable hour requirement, and we incentivize for billing going above the minimum. So if you go over that, there's additional hourly bonuses and team bonuses and things like that. Gives some people ownership of their practice. And if they want to, hey, if they got a big trip coming up and they want to make more money, they can bill more, work more, take on more. If it's a time in their life where they've got to, they need to be more available at home or with their family or whatnot, then, they can hit the standard thresholds.
So if I've got this right, and you can correct me, so we had the KPI measurements, we had the financial uh, leadership, I guess, from our new CFO, and then we put in 7 lawyers, and we had enough work. And you guys gave them a very unique compensation system that includes bonuses for performance and bonuses for marketing and KPIs that they can actually impact their comp by working more, working less, generating more business, not generating more business. You basically put them in the driver's seat of their own practice. Is that a fair
It
summary?
is. And during that same time period, somebody kept saying something about productivity follows capacity, not the other way around. Something
Oh,
about
goodness. You've only taken the W Revenue Workshop how many times, Carl?
I think 5.
5. So so this is my big argument. Carl's yanking my chain. So my argument is capacity has to be invested in first before you get the revenue. So revenue follows capacity. So what you guys did is you invested in 7 lawyers at the same time.
We had lost a couple of lawyers too, but it was a net increase.
Yeah. And to be fair, it wasn't all at the same time, but it was in that 6-month period.
Yeah. Within the first week or so, when a new attorney starts, I'll go up to him and tell, you know what, here's what you're going to see about 6 months from now. We don't hide your name on our website or LinkedIn or anything like that. You're building this firm's brand and your own a base of contacts and clients and referral sources and all of that kind of stuff. We want to brag on you, but you need to know that with today's technology, headhunters are scraping that data and they're going to call you in 6 months. And I warn them that we have been known as a really good practice building of your legal capacity and capabilities within the Houston area and the Texas area. We have had one guy got his dream job at Halliburton. That's the one he wanted. We had another attorney who's now senior staff attorney with the DOJ in the bankruptcy section in Houston. We have one is general counsel of the second largest ag finance company in Texas. I warn them, pick good jobs when you get ready if you want to leave. Don't pick what a headhunter tells you, but recognize that your talent is increasing and your capabilities and capacity for thinking on your feet is going to increase, and be ready. And that's marketable. That has helped so that people aren't leaving in 6 months. Now it's maybe a couple of years if they do, or they're thinking, maybe there's a long-term place for me here.
That's great. So you guys both, one of the things that you do and you do very well, and Carl, you've always done, Brent, you obviously are like your dad this way. You guys are very authentic. You don't hide the ball. You're pretty transparent with everything. You guys are pretty, what you see is what you get. So let me ask you this. During that time period, was there a core values reset? Was there something that you can say this was a pivot point as well culturally inside the firm? Hey, it's Steve. I just want to make sure if you have not bought your tickets or registered for this year's summit, it is taking place in Orlando, November 6th and 7th. This is the event of the year. It's a fantastic opportunity for you to work on your great practice and great life. It gives you the opportunity to connect with your Atticusins if you're a member. And if you're not an Atticus, it gives you a chance to come check us out and see if this is the right community for you. Now, this year, we've got some great speakers. We have the one and only Doré Baldwin, who's going to talk to you about resilience, how to work on your game, applying the pro athlete mindset at work and life. And of course, we have Barb Betts, how to be unforgettable, how to build relationships, gain referrals, and unlock reliable revenue. And of course, we have Matthew Immersion, who's going to talk about human-centered leadership, how to prioritize mental health, increase well-being, and mitigate burnout across high-performing teams. Each of these speakers are designed to help you take your practice and take your life to the next level. Now, bring your team, bring team members, bring people that you want to check out, joining the Atticus community. Just come and have a great time. Now, registration is open. Spots are filling up fast. Last year it sold out. The hotel sold out. We had people going to overflow hotels. So if you haven't secured your spot for the summit today, stop what you're doing and go do that now. This is an event you don't want to miss. So get registered and join us at this year's summit. With that, I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
I would say before that time period, the COVID time period, there was a reset. As part of one of my Atticus goals, we collectively decided we were going to buy a law firm. It did not work. In fact, it was deplorable how bad it did not work. And what it taught me then is that we need to be really cognizant all the time of our core values and our corporate culture. What does it mean? What are we trying to profess here? And we wanted to recognize that our corporate culture of what people that work here, they see the camaraderie, the respect, the honesty within how we treat each other, the friendship. We fired a really key attorney one time for talking very poorly with other teammates. And we just not going to tolerate it. And that particular attorney had some strong client relationships that we lost for a while. They came back.
I also think on that point, I think there were two things. One was, so I joined the firm in like July of 2020, and I worked very closely at that time in that time period with a gentleman who'd been a long time referral source, friend of the firm at other companies. He had gotten a job at a company in Fort Worth, and he and I worked very closely together. You know, we were going and meeting at outdoor taco places during COVID because we couldn't meet in person, and that sort of thing. And one of those conversations, I asked him, like, hey, what sticks out about our firm? Like, why have you stuck with us through multiple different companies? Or he would leave one company and go to another one and bring us along with him. And he told me, he's like, Carl is one of the best problem solvers I've ever seen. He's always mindful of the business needs. It's not just about brute power, legal, whatever. It's how do we get this thing solved for our client as quickly and efficiently, and many times creatively as I can. There are many times when I'm in a call and he pitches some creative, crazy idea, and I'm going, that cannot possibly work. That is a terrible idea. But and then it does. We'll try it, and it does. And I'm like, okay, stand corrected. So when we started thinking about how do we build a long-term strategy here, one of the key things was I wanted to document and put what our core values were, and I wanted to think of what are things that we do very well that other firms don't, or what makes us unique. And I think that's where our first core value is problem solving, and we tell our people from jump, like when they're in their onboarding, really in their interview, is 9 times out of 10, trial and extended legal fights are not what our clients need. They need us to get in there, get creative, solve the problem. That's your number one job. And so I think that really flowed into defining our core values, flowed into how we define the type of attorney and candidate that we look for when we're hiring, even the type of client in a lot of ways. If a client's like, we want the Rambo, burn every bridge, that might not always be the best fit for us. So I think that was all key in that time period, mid 2020 into 2020, and then as things started slowing down and some of those issues in 2021 where we needed to start really thinking, how do we adjust for the next 10, 20, 30 years, that set the stage there.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because one of the things it sounded like you were doing or were concerned about was tightening your intake and being clear about who you're serving and why you're serving. Because you're saying if you're looking for a Rambo litigation firm, we're not your firm. We're really here to help you solve your problem, get it solved effectively and quickly as possible. If there's some litigation involved, we're not afraid of that. But we're not here to squeeze every dollar out of a litigation case. So, what else did you change in intake during that time period?
Well, so I'll preface by saying Carl accuses me of having big law bias, and that I try and I'm not willing to help the small guy sometimes, and I remind him that he's not a solo poor put up a shingle, has to pay, do whatever he can to keep the lights on. And so that's sometimes the butting of heads that we have. Um,
Let me help out. One of the first ones is something that Atticus has said for years, and that is retainers, initial retainers. Brent has pushed it, and I have not really liked it at first. And I realize now that things have changed. The world has changed since COVID, and you have to recognize that even a new corporate client has to pay a retainer.
for a long time, for 30 years, it was a lot of built on trust and that sort of thing. And now, we have a little more of a trust but verify mentality. And we've even expanded it more recently, but we have retainer guidelines that is part of the onboarding that the associates and attorneys all are aware of. These are how we do it. There's checklists and flow charts that help us do that. We have a form document that's signed. These are some of the attorneys who we refer to, so that our people know who to send stuff to. And we try and be very good with on reciprocal referrals and on those relationships. We do stuff in other states as well sometimes. So we often, we keep pretty detailed list of local counsel that we work with. A lot of them are Atticus, and vice versa. I've done a lot of oil and gas matters for Atticus folks who are in Michigan or California or someplace like that. Recently, in the last few months, we've even gone to paid consults for a lot of especially the flat rate real estate planning, probate, because we needed to weed out people who weren't really serious about doing it. We were spending too much time on the phone chasing after potential clients when we had other things we needed to be focusing on.
Got it. So we improved the intake, everything from requiring retainers, making sure that Carl's clear that we're running a large firm. We're not, solos in a survival mentality anymore. And that we get very clear that the type of clients that we want, we aggressive on referring out. We have a larger network now than we had before. And we're also being very, very intentional of how we price for consultations to weed out anybody that's a tire kicker or they're really not either not qualified or not really interested. They're just, kind of chewing up our time. Another question for you. To hire 7 lawyers in 6 months, I appreciate you didn't hire 7 lawyers at one time, but you did hire 3 at one time. What type of improvements did you have to make to your hiring and training processes?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And this is where another one of those, I think, principles of building on 30 years of things that Carl had done really well, building the foundation, but then needing to adapt and continue to improve. For example, I probably was an Atticus project he had an onboarding plan that he had developed years past with the goal of, I want to get attorneys profitable within 3 months was, I think, the goal, was the premise behind it.
I like that. I like that. That's a good idea, Carl. I like that idea. That idea.
It took 2 to 3 months, and I said, we got to get better. And so we came up with an onboarding scheme to show everybody, here's how the Xerox machine does a scan. Here's where to make coffee. And then everything from there. How do you do your billings? What a time slip should look like. Well, all of that is kind of my wife always says that she just married another engineer with no social skills. But all of that all of that is how I just like trying to figure out a better way and coming up with here's this problem, let's see what we can do. So the first time I said, here's what we need to do. This is the goal that I want to set. And it was one of my top quarterly goals, a goal setting thing. One of our associates said, I'd like to make the first crack at that. I said, all right, let's try it. See what you come up with. We had made some iterations but it started in the beginning from how to move through our systems until now it is videos that we have created, primarily Brent's created, on here's how you use Centerbase, here's how you use NetDocs, here's where you go for videos we've done on lunch and learns from other attorneys within the firm. We do lunch and learns for continuing education requirements, and all of that is part of it. And there's more too in the onboarding thing.
Brent, you've really led a lot of the training to our audience members who struggle with training attorneys, training staff. What advice that give them a couple of simple tips of what they could do practically today to improve their training processes?
Sure. I think it kind of goes to what I was saying before with Carl had his onboarding plan and we needed to adapt it and adjust and improve it going forward. And one of the big things we did was embrace video as a means of doing that. One thing, and part of it was I was frustrated with having to meet with people again and again to talk about the same stuff. So I would just, if I'm doing a training session on, our litigation timeline processes or our pre-bill processes, whatever the case may be, I'll just turn on the record function on Zoom or Teams or whatever, save it, and then we have a whole library of those resources, and then I can pull those onto the training materials. Another thing we get a lot when we do internal kind of polling or just getting feedback from our folks is, I want more mentoring. I want more mentoring. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or post COVID. I don't know, but it definitely seems like it's something that is very necessary and important. But it's hard to quantify what that is. And so one thing that we did was we just started twice a month having lunch and learns with the team, and we rotated around. Every attorney kind of goes once a quarter or so, and they'll about different topics, and usually it'll be a topic where maybe they would have come to me and had some question about depositions or something, and we'll talk it through, and then I'm going to say, and guess what, you're going to be on the lunch and learn calendar in 4 months to do a lunch and learn on prepping for depositions, because I personally believe that teaching something is the kind of oftentimes the best way of learning it. So we'll have a variety of those things. Sometimes we'll bring in guest speakers through some different organizations. I've had friends who are judges and mediators and things like that, and I'll have them pop on at lunch and share their experience. We had a sitting federal judge join us for a lunch COE last year to talk about legal writing and advocacy in the courtroom and all that. And funny enough, one of our brand new associates appeared in front of this judge just a couple months later, and he texted me afterwards and said, "She did great. I remembered her from that lunch and learn."
No way.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's true.
That's so cool. So great work, guys. I'm gonna, you changed a lot of things coming out of that time period, everything from intake, hiring culture, compensation, new KPI, new tech stack. One of the key leadership things that you've mentioned in the past is Lisa Rothberg. Could you talk about the key role Lisa played in this and what you think her leadership provided to the firm?
So I cannot speak more highly of Lisa, because this is not just a story, I think, of father to son transition, because Lisa has been a partner since before I got here. She became a partner, I think, about a year and a half before I joined the firm. And then we had another partner also at that time who has since left and gone to a different firm. But there were plenty of times, and I wouldn't necessarily have blamed her, where she could have gone to a much bigger firm making a bunch of money because she is an expert in what she does on the mineral liens side of stuff. But she believed in what we were building and she stuck with us and really did a great job of seeing, okay, Brent and Carl are good at this. How do we counterbalance those things? But I don't want to sugarcoat it and make it seem like everything was gravy. There were plenty of fights and frustrations and tense moments. We're going to, are we sure we need to invest like this? Are we sure? It wasn't just her, it was all of us questioning it, just trying to figure out. But I give her a lot of credit, for sticking with that. And even now, like, she is very supportive. I do a lot of the numbers, projection, vision casting, firm admin, recruiting stuff. There's a lot of law partners who'd be like, Brent, go bill some more hours, please. Like, I don't need you doing all the business side of things. But she knows, because she's done Atticus, like, you got to work on the business. She knows that's something that I'm good at, and she's very supportive of that. She's phenomenal at culture setting within the Houston office and understanding what's going on there. So it's been really great to see that over the last couple of years of kind of all going through this valley together and now coming out the other side and stronger than ever. I'll also say, so we've set these goals each year for revenue and DRL hours. Last year we set what we called our big, hairy, nasty goal of basically double your revenue goal. And so if we hit that, we're going to take everybody and a significant other on a cruise. And it has been so fun this year because now that number is looking like it's feasible even this year. And so it's been really fun to see the excitement of all the people, planning for it, wanting details, wanting to do this or that. And so it's been fun on that front.
And I'm with you guys. I mean, she's a great definition of a partner because if she was on her own, solo, or another firm, she'd be doing great. She's very, very talented. But where she's at now with you is that she's actually in a better place, so to speak. Like her talents are being more utilized. You guys are a really good team. And so she's a critical element. She's not here on the episode, but I want to make sure that we're all clear and she's clear that you guys would have not made that pivot without her leadership and her hard work. So she's a key part of this conversation for us.
I'll say one thing else on that. It also kind of goes to some of the stressors that we had in that 2022 period. Like I said, I try to be as transparent as I can, and it was not all kumbaya and rainbows. At the end of 22, we were in a pretty exhausted spot, I would say. We had brought all these new people. We could see that there was the numbers were good, but we weren't there yet. We're spending a bunch of money on this investment. We're not having shareholder distributions, because we're kind of reinvesting back in the company. We had probably it was January of 23, I think. We had probably the worst shareholder meeting we'd ever had. Everyone was mad and grumpy and frustrated, and Carl was checked out in my mind. He was struggling to figure out what he wanted to do, and he grew up a little bit, and we were just trying to figure out all these things at once. Our other partner asked a question, it ended in this big blow up thing, and afterwards he reached out, and I don't know what just happened. I was like, I'm going to handle it. And so I spent a lot of time putting together an email to my dad saying, trying to put in words like, how are we going to get over this hump? And I basically said it, and I said, I know we can reach our goals if you're bought in and excited and passionate and helping. I don't know if we can, if you retire and aren't involved. I don't know that. But I know we can't if we're in this half in, half out, some might use a 4-letter word or get off the pot type of mentality. And I was terrified, because again, this is a big, crucial conversation. How are you putting in it? And I also had to tell him, not just from a business, but also from a son to his dad, like, I still need you to help us build this. I still want to work with you. I didn't, I don't take it for granted that I get to work with my dad and that we get along well enough to do that. And I said, like, I'm getting like frustrated with you on like a personal level, and I don't want this to affect that. But the main goal was like, you've got to kind of make some decisions here, and you're looking to us to make them for you, and we can't do that.
Yeah, Carl, you interpreted this
That's
miss
not
the
what
shot across the bow, like, Carl,
no,
do
it
the
was not.
thing or get off the pot. How did you interpret this email?
It was clear in my mind. It was absolutely clear that this was the nicest email. Dad, I need you. I want your background. I want your expertise. Stay around and help. That's how I interpreted that, and I've told that to everybody. So that's what happened.
But I really think this is a because that it was that, but it also was like other could have been like if he had responded differently, this whole thing might be coming apart at the seams right here. Because I also felt like I was doing this on behalf of I was the only one of the partners that really could put voice to this because there was this family aspect here as well.
Well, advice, Brent, Carl, from the perspective of giving other people founder to successor advice, what would you recommend to make a smooth transition? I mean, you guys have the father son thing going, which is good and bad. We have incredible interpretations of communications differently, so that's always fun. But what would you guys say if you say from one generation to the next? What would the transition advice be?
Don't rush into things. Just like you tell your witness in a deposition when that question comes up, count to 3 before you give an answer. We need to do the same thing. Recognize that there are crucial conversations, and sometimes we have to make a little notes outline before we have that kind of a conversation. Um, Recognize that sometimes you got to set the business aside. Um, when I'm dealing with grandkids, I have to recognize that Brent's decision is the decision. That's not the same as a law firm.
I want to get a clip of that right there.
I love that. Brent, how about you?
I think being true to yourself is really important. It would have been very unauthentic for me if I had come in as a leadership role and just tried to be him because I'm not. But I've definitely learned some things. I think that it's where the humility and openness and understanding that not everything I do is perfect either, and having to be open to those conversations. Um, I do think slow and steady is the key. Don't make really rash decisions. When you're talking about, do I want to go work with my family or do I not? Do I want to take on this partner or not? Because we've all seen partnerships, family or not, fall apart, and so it's always a challenge. But yeah, like I said, I think being true to yourself, being humble, you know, willing to learn, and then willing to figure out how do you complement one another. Whether that's me complimenting Carl and how we lead, or how Lisa and I complement one another and how we manage the firm on the more day to day basis. Because Carl has turned over most of those day to day things to us, but it's also still nice to have him to pull in if there is a tough situation to weigh in because he's seen a lot of these crazy situations in 35 years that Lisa and I have not seen yet.
I agree with all of that, except I'm the consensus builder. Brent is more of the director. He tells people what, no, I'm the one that looking for, oh, no, that's absolutely different. But even with Elisa, there's been times we've had discussions, arguments. One of us want to do something. We just figure maybe that's not how we do it. Maybe we need to research it a little bit more. I don't know how other law firms do it. That works for us, and keeps us, I think, out of trouble sometimes.
And that's been a big mindset for us as we now have, we lost all these people, we didn't have enough associates, all that. Now we've got a really great group, and several of them, they're hungry and want to be partners one day. We said, okay, if we were gonna add more partners, what would that look like? And so like I call it our shareholder pipeline, but it's here's what a shareholder would look like, here's what a senior associate would look like, here's what a new associate would look like, here's what a law clerk would look like on the same trait. So a trait of business development. If we want them to be at this point at shareholder time, what are the traits that we would look for and build and network and develop when they're a law clerk for us, when they're a brand new associate? Our core values. If we're saying our core value of problem solving is that big one, we want someone who's a shareholder to be the personification of that. What are the traits and skills, whether it's subjective or objective, going back to a law clerk? And so I think that's also helped us on the hiring and retention, because if people say, like, what's the future here look like, we give them that and say, here's the metrics. We meet with them at least once a year, more like quarterly, to go over, like, where are they on that metric, where do we see areas of growth. Um, and I think that's really helped us on some of that retention and training, and what makes me really excited about the next 35 years.
That was a great piece of work because it had expectations at different levels of career growth for each attorneys and paralegals, and the receptivity of it has been pretty good. So we roll it out multiple times a year. Certainly during our, what do we call it when we all get together?
The retreat.
Yeah, that.
So, as we start to wrap up, any last words of wisdom, Carl, from you?
I think that you just have to recognize you only have so much time, and you really, we didn't put this down. I turned 70 this year. Brent's 40. You only have so much time, and a lot of your time needs to be involved in what do you want your practice to look like, and how do you want to define what you have done with the time that you spend as a lawyer, because we affect a lot of people and a lot of companies. You do a little collection project for a company, and what you have really done is not a collection, but you made sure those people working at that company are going to maintain their jobs and their positions in what they're doing. And so we all have a part of that. And part of that time that you have is working on your own firm as hard as you work for your client base. That's the only thing I can think of.
That's fantastic. I think that's fantastic. Brent, how about you?
Yeah, the one of the best pieces of advice um, I got, and I repeat a lot to law students. I speak with lots of law students at A&M's law school because it's just down the street. Is look for a firm that practices law the way you want to practice it when you're looking for a job. Because if the partner's a jerk, if the partner is yelling at their staff or cutting corners, that doesn't not going to get better when you're there on a full-time basis. And so one thing we do, and I do with every new hire, is I tell them straight up on day one, you're not going to be asked to do something unethical, and we're not going to put up with harassment or any of that kind of nonsense. And so setting those tones early. So that's something, like, I believe Carl has been really good at throughout his career, of building a place that has a very diverse, very unique, very creative team. Something I want to continue to do, and I want to create a place that is that for people. When they look in, they say, I want to be a part of that. That's different. Our billing model is different. Our hours model is different. We have hybrid schedules because our people, and it's worked well for us. And I tell people, it's like, if you come to me and say you found a better gig somewhere else, I'll say congratulations. Like, hopefully we can be referral sources, co-counsel, something down the road. I just want to make it as hard as possible for you to come in and tell me that, and I think we're pretty good at that. And I think it goes to the DNA that Carl built, but also that we've been able to build onto that foundation. And I think that's one of those competitive advantages that we have, because we all know the money at some firms is just stupid. You can't, I can't compete on that. But what we can compete on is culture, mentorship, those sorts of things. I think that's a competitive advantage for us, and one that I want to continue to explore and build on for years to come. But it really requires the leadership to be open to feedback and open to change, and acknowledging failures and being transparent, and all those things to make that possible.
But this law firm we are not going to bow down to a political pressure. And there are firms that have done that and will do that. And I think if you're a lawyer, you just got to realize money is not what drives you. It shouldn't be. If it is, maybe you need to rethink your career path and your career goals. But there's room, and there are places that will fit, your desires and what you want to accomplish as a lawyer, maybe better than some of those firms.
Yeah, so your argument is the ultimate of what this whole show is about. Integrating great life and great practice, and really making sure that your practice serves your life and not the other way around. And you guys have done that brilliantly. You've come out of a terrible stumble for the firm, reinvented the firm, transformed the firm, and come out stronger, both as father and son, but also as partner. So very, very well done. Any last words?
Don't be afraid if you're at Atticus and you're sitting there going, this doesn't sound exactly like what my firm does. Ask questions, be willing to okay, we don't do personal injury law, but there might be some ideas over here that we can adapt here. It's not a one size fits all type of thing. That was something that took me a little bit of time to figure out at Atticus. Like, I'm surrounded by a bunch of solo PI firms. Like, we don't do that. A, there's referral opportunities there probably, and B, there's still culture and big picture and type things that you can take from that.
That's wonderful. Carl, how about you?
There is a lot of work that can be generated between Atticus and law firms. You just have to think out of the box just a little bit, and sometimes. So, for example, all the estate planning firms that are all over the nation, I regularly tell them, when you have a client who has an oil and gas interest and you don't know what to do with it, I'm a former petroleum engineer, and we do oil and gas law, and we can transfer that interest for those families. There you go.
Carl, I'm going to make sure we put your website in the show notes, because that was the best elevator talk laser pitch I've had on the podcast in a while. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. Sure.
That's perfect. All right, guys, well done. So I want to thank you. I want to thank you for, first and foremost, being incredible leaders in our community and coming on the show and really sharing authentically, both as father and son and partners, the good and the bad and what you've done. So excellent work, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thanks for everything. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.